Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspective Podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have a very special guest on. We have on Lina Lugova. Now, Lina, you are not only a chief marketing officer, but you're a chief mother officer too. Right? You're a CMO two different ways. You've got a beautiful young toddler that you're the mother to. You've got a really interesting background, business background, that I'm going to want you to explain a little bit more. You've been an executive coach, a CMO, an international B2B company. But you also came from Ukraine and you're living in Poland right now. And so there's a lot that's going on, obviously, with the war and everything. And what you're going to talk about today is how to define success in the new disruption economy. Right. And disruption isn't just about the war, right? A disruption, we're all in constant stages of disruption inside of our own economies that we all navigate. But what I'd love to do before we get started is just maybe give you an opportunity to expand a little bit more on that background, and then we'll dive right in.
Wow, Steve, thank you for, such a warm welcome. So basically, I've spent the last 9 years at EPOM, which is a net tech company offering both white label DSP and net server. So I spent there, reshaping the digital marketing processes, brand, tone of voice, and market positioning. So, I helped them shift to a human-first brand. And that really worked out because we grew qualified leads by 35%, strengthened inbound by double digits, and directly influenced revenue. And before EPOM, I was agency side designing digital strategies for publishers like Forbes and other top tier publishers across CS markets. And then, there I learned how to scale all that regional nuances into global impact. And also beyond all this marketing and media world, I am a coach helping leaders thrive in times of uncertainty and help them build a resilience. So I was basically among the early pioneers of programmatic advertising, starting back in 2011, when we had to be very, very inventive and constantly iterate to get the most out of all that paid channels. So that's where I think that I built my core strengths is, creativity plus data. So I think this mindset I've carried ever since helped me a lot, especially now when we're talking about disruptive economy. It's a bit hype now, right? Because it's like, what does this disruption even mean?
Well, that's where I would love to start, right? What your definition of a disruption economy, and then we're going to kind of peel back the layers here and talk about how do we create success in that. But if you would mind just sharing is, what do you think a disruption economy is, and how do we need to think about that?
I think that it will be very helpful to remember the book of Nassim Taleb, Antifragility. And so, he described this new economy as a state of constant, unpredictable changes driven by some external forces like geopolitical shifts, right? Continuous tech innovation, like, oh my God, that AI revolution that everyone's talking about for years. Also, evolving customer behavior, because customers, they need very different things, I guess, now that they used to even 2-3 years ago, even a year ago. So that all leaves us with the fact that the old playbook simply doesn't work. So everything that I learned at my university is no longer relevant. I mean, you should constantly adapt. And I think that modern leaders or chief marketing officers should perceive them as a person with a goldfish mindset, because they shouldn't remember neither their success nor failures, because they should have their mind clean to see and connect all these dots early.
I love everything you said there, But one of the things that's a big takeaway is that playbooks are almost a dirty word, right? Our go-to-market strategy these days, right? Because it assumes that there's a set of motions that we can activate, right, that are going to create success. And the one thing that we know is that, our ICP, our ideal customer profile, is complex and always changing, right? And so there's always something that's going to be disruptive, right? It's going to be a war. It's going to be COVID, right? It's going to be a new technology that comes in and changes things quite dramatically. Or what we can just expect, what the bar for success actually is. And so that's where I wanted to ask the next question, right? How do we define success in a disruption economy? How does that get redefined in your mind?
I think, to me, success now means building resilient and decentralized teams that can adapt very fast and make decisions on their own without, any supervision. From a CMO, this requires cross-team communication that is very structured, fast, and very transparent. Because you need to make sure that product sales and marketing are well synced, even if they're going on a different pace, right? So none of this works without careful planning and strong leadership. So to me, successful CMO would be a person who can communicate effectively and communicate, that cross-channel goals, and then see the bigger picture in it, and then reevaluate their strategy accordingly.
Yeah, it's really interesting because today we have more technology at our disposal than we've ever had. We have more data at our disposal than we've ever had. So it's easy to get kind of hide behind all of that, right? And make decisions. And what I'm hearing you say is that we've got to stay connected, right? This, even in AI, human in the loop is right, like a big topic, a big conversation. And it almost feels like we're going back, right? Like human connections, human conversations, like we can't forget those, right? Because we can start to not rely on those. We can rely on our messaging and we can rely on all kinds of things to basically get in the way of actually having a conversation, right? And those conversations is where so much happens, so much innovation, so much shared knowledge happens. Is that like that's the takeaway from what I was hearing you say, is that it's just important, right, that we stay connected internally, but then I extrapolated that to externally too in our customers. Is that a good takeaway?
Absolutely, because you know what? Like a couple of days ago, I read an article that where there was a data that like over 60% of adults in US report feeling lonely regularly. It's even worse, right? Because it affects everything from productivity to problem solving, because that sense of loneliness and isolation, it's not safe, right? So we cannot be creative in that state. We cannot build a good communication in that state when we just, discuss our strategy with ChatGPT, not with real customers, right?
Right.
So it's it
Right.
can be, that silent treat inside teams where you just, talk numbers can have a real bad impact on the productivity and actually employees feeling safe. Because I remember in 2022, after Russia started its full-scale invasion, my whole team was in Ukraine, and it was a terrifying time. And I realized that just checking on some task wasn't what they needed. So I changed the purpose of our daily meetings. So I stopped that small talk and, I showed up and I shared how I really felt, like the frustration, the uncertainty. And I told the team that I was here for them, in any way they needed, not just professionally. And something just shifted because people started opening up. And these meetings became a space for sharing and, for release and for connection. So that small change helped us not just survive as a team, but build an unshakable sense of trust. And to me, I think the thing that I really am proud of is that like 100% of my team, which has 10 employees and like 10 freelancers, they reported that they aspire work as a safe space.
You know, two words that you balanced there. One was safety, right? One was trust. And being in a safe environment in a business and outside of wartime, which that's just tremendous what you were able to do there, a culture that provides psychological safety, right? Where I can try, I can fail, I can be me, right? I can do things without fear that I'm going to get in trouble. That's where innovation happens. Secondly, you mentioned trust. And trust is, I think, one of the number one issues that we have in business. And that actually came from a number of studies. Forrester did a study, and they showed that trust was the number one issue facing B2B companies today. And if you look at like the Edelman LinkedIn trust barometer that is worldwide, trust has been going down for decades. Decades. Right? And it's worse. The geopolitical climate now has eroded trust in so many different ways. And so our brands are trust marks, right? But literally, this study showed that 61% of the worldwide respondents were worried that the business leaders were being intentionally misleading. Intentionally. You know what really helps build trust? The conversations that you're talking about, right? How does like this idea of having these conversations, creating psychological safety, but how does that extrapolate to outside of the inner team, but into the world of your customers?
Yeah. So as you've told that like last year's study, I think it was WARC study, it really found that campaigns focused on long-term brand building, they really do outperform short-term sales activation and all that, clickbait information by 60% over time. But they get less budget because they don't show the immediate result, right? Because you need time to build that trust. So I think that living in a fast dopamine world where everybody is just scrolling, swiping, and skipping, and the platforms are literally built and engineered to reward the shortest possible attention span, right? I think that fast content could give you reach, but it gives you that resonance that you need to build that trust. Because if your post goes viral, then disappears, it doesn't change behavior. Everyone just clicks and that's it. So I think that, we decided to go deeper because, well, those posts on LinkedIn and social media, they show up consistently. So they give reason to scroll, but we would love to give our customers reason to stay, to get smarter, to discover something new. And we use a personal data and our first party data and our own research and our customer experience to build that trust. So we make fewer content, but this content is more meaningful. And we are very open to the dialogue because we get a lot of feedback from our blog posts or from our case studies, from our leads with questions like, could you please explain also that? And we do it. And, that builds that expert level that every company is seeking for. But it's just a long-term strategy. It won't give you fast results. And you should make that tough choices because if you are limited in resources, right, you should definitely choose conversions and trust over all that hype, AI generated posts, like you've seen them. Like, oh my God, this prompt will make you more efficient in no time. And it's like constant deja vu. Like, I haven't seen it before, right?
You talked before in a conversation we had about a dopamine driven attention to economy, right? And I feel like you're kind of getting to that area right now. But what specifically did you mean by that? Like dopamine driven attention economy?
Oh, actually, there is even a picture when, you know, it is like a real world. In a real world, you would like read a book. And then there is another step, somewhere in the middle. You will just watch a summary of that book, which is like 10 to 15 minutes. And, the dopamine would be, you will be watching a TikTok about that book, which is like 10, 15 seconds. So that would be it. And it's also like about sports, right? Doing sports and betting on sports. It's exactly the dopamine culture.
Okay. So what does that necessarily mean? Shifting, right? Knowing that we're kind of living in this dopamine kind of economy, this disruptive economy, what do we have to do to be successful? Like, what are the changes that we need to be thinking about in order to be successful?
Well, what I've learned is that I don't need to over optimize every dollar because I need to keep part of my budget in reserve. And that buffer will give me room to move fast when things change. For example, with that recent shift to that AI content optimization, we had to adapt our marketing strategy that was focused purely on organic traffic. But now, organic does not mean just search engine optimization. It also means AI optimization. So, to test this hypothesis, I really need some budget. So this was very helpful. Second, we do run small and very fast experiments because, better done than perfect.
Yeah.
So we test different messaging, different content, and different channels constantly, but we spend like 20% of our time on that because mainly we focus on what's already given us conversions and maximizing these channels to the fullest. Also, I think that I diversify as much as I can. Lead sources, partnership, and even I have the list of trusted freelancers to have my back. So, I am always ready to pivot fast because everything changes very fast. So I think that every corporation should have like a number two person to keep the ball rolling if the CMO or user acquisition manager will not be able to deliver or like quit. So no, it's risky, right? So you need to have a plan B. So I'm keeping my freelancers close. And I made a pretty good knowledge base so that, if I'm gone, everybody could take, from where I left. Also, I think that the very helpful strategy for success is in that disruptive times would be asking and planning from where we want to be in 6 months or in a year, because not just counting on the resources we have now, just plan for more. And regular alignment with finance, sales, and analysts, because it's just necessary now. You're not working in a bubble.
One of the things that you talked about was spending dollars testing, right? We have a finite amount of budget, right? And so we don't want to waste any of it. But if we're not constantly testing and we're just spending money the way it's always worked or has recently worked, we're going to guarantee that we're going to start losing significant parts of our budget because areas are going to stop working, right? So as soon as this is kind of like what you were saying at the beginning, right? It's like as soon as we find something that works, that's the playbook for today, right? It's not the playbook for tomorrow. So one of the big things that I took away from what you were saying there was that we have to be in a disruption economy. We have to constantly be testing for the new things that are going to work, right? And I want to just ask you about that, kind of your methodology. Like, how do you incorporate that kind of thinking throughout the team? I mean, I know the plans of the media plans and how you're spending dollars you're testing, but does that extend out to the way that you want your team thinking and constantly coming up with ideas that can be tested in and outside of like the specific budget and how it gets allocated in what channel?
Well, for example, the question that I constantly asking myself and do ask the team, like before rolling out any AI or automation, before rolling out any testing, I ask them, how many times can we afford to be wrong when it comes to lead quality and lead generation? So, because, if you're just automating your acquisition or testing something blindly just because everyone in the industry does it, and it's wrong, then you're burning your budget and trust. So we're testing AI tools like Surface SEO very accurately, because this Surface SEO is only for smarter content optimization. And we do test some ChatGPT helpers for our researchers, but we apply all this test selectively, keeping in mind our main OKRs, because we definitely have OKRs. Like we have, I'm constantly repeating the goal for everything that we do should drive more conversions.
Yeah.
If it cannot drive conversion, that we shouldn't probably be doing that.
Yeah.
So this year, our mantra was very simple, like fewer distractions, more decision backed by data. So that's how we kept performance very high, even when our budgets were tight and expectations from us weren't, because even if you did experience that budget cut, still the stakeholders expect a lot from you, because they've heard all that stories about AI automating everything. So they expect you to deliver like twice as much content, but it's impossible. So, and you should be the one, CMO should be the one to communicate that.
So I have two more questions I want to ask. One is constant testing, constant iteration. What are some of the mistakes that you've made along the way, or the team that you're like, oh, well, we really learned from that, right? That you could share with us, because we are better because of the mistakes that we make, right? So if we're going to be iterating all the time, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to try things that don't work. And that's a natural part of that process. So is there any learning that you could share with us?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, actually, I think the learning that myself learned the hard way. So I learned that more traffic doesn't mean better leads. And it definitely doesn't mean growth. Because back in 2021, even before the AI content boom, my team was very small, like 5 or 6 people, but we were small but strong. So we had some amazing T-shaped specialists, great at user acquisition, and thanks to solid search engine optimization, PR, and that was just, building brand awareness everywhere, like we were everywhere. So we doubled, and in some months tripled our website traffic. And naturally, I assumed, wow, more traffic equals more qualified leads, right?
Right.
So we got the volume, but the lead quality just tanked because people weren't replying to emails, and the majority of them were either generic or low intent. And we have zero leverage to qualify them properly. And in B2B, this kind of gap really hurts because and it was to us and to me, it was a wake-up call, because we weren't just leaking leads, we were leaking focus, because I didn't have a user retention manager. I couldn't delegate low funnel ownership. So I took it on myself. I partnered with our analyst and did a deep dive into all that channel performance. And basically, we started scoring leads very differently since then. Not just by volume, but by many quality indicators like business versus personal email, tier 1 versus tier 3 countries. Level of intent, was it just, curiosity, or was it some actual intent, right? And from late 2022, we shifted because the traffic wasn't the goal anymore. And our conversion became the North Star. So we launched fewer campaigns, fewer blog posts, so we weren't just doing everything that our competitors did. We focused solely on conversions and what performed best to us. So we had a better content to ICP match, and that shift didn't just help marketing, it helped sales close faster and with less friction. So that big traffic spikes feel great on a dashboard. So it was my hard lesson. I'm still a little bit embarrassed of that, to be honest.
No, we have to prove that to ourselves. Like our goal is to get higher volume, higher quality at the same time, right? But it's harder to do that. Usually when you get a lot higher volume, you get a lot lower quality. And that's just, you prove that out, right?
Yeah, and when you don't have that, one thing that a lot of businesses lack is B2B companies need to take a closer look on the pre-sales, that stage, because usually that pre-sales stage goes fully on marketing, but we lack this very deep customer knowledge and use cases, because even if we do automated marketing or that email chains, they'll still be not quite, they will be fine, but they won't perform as they're supposed to be. Because I think for a small to mid-sized B2B company, I think that they should take a closer look on that middleman between marketing and sales. And that would be this pre-sales marketer who will try to close these leads to a demo calls or to a trials. So actually, this is another insight that I've seen.
Well, we've talked about a lot here. And our poor human brains can only remember about 2 or 3 things. So what I'd love to do is ask you one last question. In under a minute, what's the single most important takeaway that you want people to have from tuning into this conversation?
I think that everyone should remember that success today isn't about perfection. It's about building trust. The brands and leaders who win are the ones willing to be real. They adapt fast. They lead with empathy, even when everything around them is in flux. So this is the most important thing that I got to say.
Well, here's what I know. People are going to have questions. Is it appropriate that I give out a link to your LinkedIn profile that people could reach out and contact you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the mission on this podcast is very simple. It's to bring executives, leaders, C-suite leaders from all over the world together that talk about how do we go to market today? Right? What are the things that we need to know? How do we need to do this? And we all have such interesting insights and perspectives that I liken it to the rising tide that lifts all boats. And I think you were a really important part of that rising tide today. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. It was a pure pleasure actually talking to you today. Because, in that world full of noise, automation, and AI, the real difference, I think, is made by, that human-to-human interaction.